Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 127. Those Who Face a God. Part 1. My party arrived at Veronica and rested for one day. The next morning, I got up first and stood at the entrance of the castle as I informed the party of my plans. Li Hyunsung asked, "Surely you're not going alone?" "I won't be alone. I'm going with those two." I pointed to Han Suyang and Asa Karen. Then Li Jihai wondered, "What are we going to do while Ajusi is gone?" "You and Hyunsung SSI are in charge of guarding Veronica's walls. Have you checked the updated scenario? Is it to defend Veronica Castle until the end of the scenario period?" "Yes. That is your mission. But, do it." "I understand." I looked at Li Hyunsung. "There is Gong Pildu, but it will be hard to stop the disasters with Armed Fortress alone. I'm sorry to leave it to you, but don't worry. Protecting a base is my specialty." I was relieved by his determined words, but I knew it wouldn't be that easy. It might seem like an easy task, but surviving this scenario was harder than going with me. If you see the snake of the first group, don't confront him head-on. Flee Veronica Castle if you have to. Can you promise me this?" "I promise." Their mission was to protect the castle until I returned. I gave orders to Li Gilyang and Xing Yusung. "Secure as many insects and monsters as possible. Your mission is to buy time." Li Gilyang and Xing Yusung nodded. "If you go to the North Forest, then there will be many unique monsters of this world. Go and tame those monsters." "Yes, Hyung. I understand, Ajusi." A large number of monsters would help bridge the gap with the disasters. In the process, the children's skills would also increase significantly. I left Veronica Castle. Han Suyang saw the people watching us from behind and asked, "So where are we going?" "The Eastern Rocky Zone." The startled Asa Karen told me. "The Japanese has already occupied that area." "I know." I stared straight at Asa Karen. She had soft and curly silver hair. She had a clear face with sharp lines, like a cartoonist had painstakingly drawn it. It was a face that gave off the feeling of a warrior rather than just a beauty. I told her, "That's why I brought you." "Do you trust me?" "I don't trust you. I just want to get back the value of saving your life." "I see." It was easier to say this than to buy her favor with kindness. In fact, Asa Karen looked worried about something. Perhaps when her troubles were over, she would tell me the information in earnest. We traveled over the plains area towards an area filled with rock formations. The trip was estimated to take 2 days, but we could do it within 1 day if we moved fast. Han Suyang asked, "What is the plan?" "Unlike us, Japan has an absolute throne. In other words, there is an absolute king among the first group who commands all of them." Han Suyang pondered on my words. "Do you mean to catch the king?" Han Suyang was really quick to understand. I nodded. Han Suyang muttered, "Well, your idea is correct. There would be a profound effect on the entire group if the master of the absolute throne dies. Of course, killing the king won't stop all of them. Still, it will allow us to hold on until the end of the scenario." Then you've been aiming for the boss since the beginning?" "I like your ambition." Then Asa Karen interrupted. "Do you know who the king of Japan is now? Isn't he the sovereign of 8 heads?" "The sovereign of 8 heads." It was abbreviated to just a snake. How do you?" Asa Karen was astonished and her body shook. It was natural. She was part of the first group and knew that type of existence the sovereign of 8 heads was. For reference, the sovereign of 8 heads wasn't the nickname for the Japanese king, but the modifier of his sponsor. The king didn't have a nickname because there was no meaning in one. You must have heard his modifier somewhere, but he isn't as easy as you think. I'm aware of that. He is Yamada no Orochi. The sky darkened at my words and there was a rumbling sound. Perhaps that guy had heard me speaking. It was a powerful force belonging to the constellations. "Orochi?" Isn't that the name of a mythical monster in Japan? That's right. Now he is Japan's king. Then why is he called by his sponsor's name? Doesn't he have a nickname? It is meaningless. That incarnation isn't sane anymore. During the 6 scenarios, he made a ridiculous contract with the sovereign of 8 heads and had his soul stolen. Asuka Ren's mouth gaped open when she heard my words. She was surprised that the incarnation of another country knew more about the circumstances than she did. Then he will be in the Rocky Zone? Yes. However, we can't catch him right now. Preparations are necessary. We are going to meet someone else in the rock area. Meeting someone? Is it Yu Jong-hyuk? He is better than Yu Jong-hyuk? Is there a person better than him? It is possible. Who? A strong person from Peaceland. Han Soo-young frowned. From Peaceland? Are you joking right now? It was understandable. This information didn't appear in the first 100 chapters. Don't you know how weak the kids here are? Han Soo-young exclaimed without giving me a chance to answer. She always looked particularly agitated when she became angry. There isn't a third-rate swordsman here, let alone a sword master. The only magic these kids can use is to create fire on a stove. I know. This isn't a first-generation fantasy novel. It is like someone has maliciously gathered only weak people. No, I don't understand it. Why did the Dakibis make this world a stage? Is this an alternative idea to give coins? I could understand why Han Soo-young was so upset. This girl might be a plagiarist, but she was a popular fantasy writer. Relax. This world wasn't made by the Dakibis. What? I looked behind me. There was a woman looking down with a flushed face. It felt like a very new writer standing in front of an experienced writer. Asuka hesitated for a moment before bowing. I'm sorry. Han Soo-young seemed to realize something. Wait, don't tell me? Asuka Ren slowly nodded. Peaceland is a world I created. Perhaps Asuka Ren shouldn't have revealed this. At first, Han Soo-young was so astonished she couldn't believe it was real. Then after 5 minutes, she murmured, well, my novel became a reality. Then another 5 minutes passed and she started scolding Asuka Ren. Why did you do that? Huh? Why? Answer me, writer. Why did you make a world like this? Asuka Ren ended up half crying. There are many mainstream worlds in Japan. So. You created this to resist the mainstream worlds? I thought that as a writer, I shouldn't bring out a mass production story. Mass production? Maybe she said something she shouldn't have. Han Soo-young declared, your work can't even be mass-produced. Huh? Han Soo-young stared at Asuka Ren like she was pathetic and then told me. Hey, Kim Dokja. Is this it? I stayed a few days in Veronica, and in this world, the Earl speaks ill of the Duke. Besides, the knights are all like parasites and only know how to dither. Asuka Ren protested, wait a minute. Shut up. We are suffering now because of you. I made it, but I wasn't the one who called you here. Look at this girl. The Dakibis bought it from you and made your world into reality. The manga must have been ruined. Let's throw all the ruined mangas into a world and kill them. You must have prayed with this thought and received a message like I will listen to your wishes. Right? It was the first time I had heard such creative reasoning. She truly was a writer. And no. That isn't possible. Then what is it? I became curious when I heard this. There was no mention of why Asuka Ren's Peaceland was adopted as a scenario in Ways of Survival. Perhaps I could get a hint about the writer of Ways of Survival from this? Han Soo-young was pulling out a sword while Asuka Ren took one step back. I interrupted them. I'm really curious, but I'm afraid we can't hear it now. Huh? Run. We moved by a hair's breadth and sharp swords slashed at where we had been standing. Asaka Ren desperately ran with a pale face. Han Suyang asked, "Shit, when did they follow us?" "They are good at stealth." "How many are there?" "4 people. They didn't underestimate us and tried to assassinate us. We had no chance in a head-on battle." Asaka Ren gasped for air and said, "It seems to be the Wind Shadow Squadron. They are the subordinates of the Sovereign of 8 Heads. Those brats have weird names." This wasn't the timing for them to chase me. It seemed that it was a mistake to mention Orochi's true name. As soon as we entered the rocky area, the range of our movements became better. It was due to Asaka Ren's guidance. Once again, the person who created the world was different. Nevertheless, the distance was narrowing as the Wind Shadow Squadron caught up to us. Han Suyang spoke like she had made up her mind. I don't know. Kim Dokja, go first. I'll buy some time. Is it okay? Don't you know me? I'm a master at dying. Then I'll believe in you. I grabbed Asaka Ren and ran. Ren SSI, there is no time anymore. Quickly find him. I don't know what you're saying. The returnee Kyrios. Huh? I shouted while avoiding a flying sword. It seemed that Han Suyang had missed some people. Tell me where Kyrios is. I don't know who that is. I expected it to be like this. In Ways of Survival, it only mentioned that Kyrios was here and he never came out directly. I really don't know. I never created such a person. Nope, you know. He is the only powerhouse of Peaceland. There isn't a person like that in my manga. Besides, the characters in my manga are weak. Then a sword thrust at us. I turned sharply and stopped. I didn't want to do this, but I had to touch her wound. Your Peaceland was terminated early in the 11th episode and you didn't get a single volume published after that. How do you? I know that you wanted authentic fantasy in your heart. However, it didn't work out. Your manga, is it really authentic fantasy? 2 people from the Wind Shadow Squadron appeared in the smoke. I would be able to cope with them if I was my usual self, but now it was hard to stop even one. I brushed aside the katana, but my wrist was broken. I activated White Pure Star Energy and shouted calmly. It was just once, but you became angry when you saw the reaction of readers and drew a person. What are you saying? He is a strong person not fit for Peaceland. You felt guilty about pandering to the public by drawing such a person. That sense of guilt ruined your Peaceland. No. I never did that. Please take responsibility until the end. Even if only one reader watches this world. It became more and more difficult for me to avoid the blades. The panicked Asaka Ren was completely frozen. 2 katanas flew towards my upper and lower half. Damn it, was I wrong? I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. Then a voice was heard. You're right. I obviously. The next moment, the surrounding air changed. I felt my limbs become stiff from the cold. Then another voice was heard. Who are you? I didn't look back, but it was clearly a presence comparable to the constellations. Otherwise my 4th wall wouldn't be shaking so much. I looked ahead and saw the Japanese people standing like stone statues. They couldn't even speak as pure white lightning fell towards them from the sky. The powerful disasters turned into ashes from the lightning. Once the clouds that caused the lightning disappeared, a small doll was floating. It was unbelievable. The powerful presence floating in the air was definitely a small person. He was properly hooked. I will ask again. Who are you? It is nice to meet you, Kyrios. Kyrios Rodgrame of Peaceland. He was one of the strongest returnees in Ways of Survival. Chapter 128. Those Who Face a God. Part 2. The strongest existences in the star stream were often called constellations. They observed the stories of every world from above. However, as I said earlier, the constellations aren't the only ones who could go against constellations. There were those who refused the path of a constellation and became demon kings or dragons that ruled at the peak of all monsters from birth. Then what about humans? Could humans who didn't walk the path of a human reach the level where they could oppose the constellation? The answer was currently right in front of me. Interesting. You gave up your existence for another planet? Kyrios could see my identity with one look. He glanced at the confused Asuka Ren beside me. I'll let it pass just once, because of your courage. Take that woman away. A returnee. Born with special talents, they transcended the category of a human thanks to the blessing of the star stream. Among the returnees, Kyrios Rodgraim was a special existence. He was very powerful among the returnees and earned enough money not to be dragged into the stories made by the Dakivis. He was a returnee who never acted in ways of survival. I have something to say to you. Say? The skills that exceeded the level of transcendence manifested and revealed their presence to me. It was the presence of a constellation that could destroy mortals just existing. Do you think you are in a position to talk to me? I was surprised that there was so much moisture inside me. My back was soaked with sweat. You dare oppose the White Storm? He was strong. I got goosebumps at the thought of how a small person could be so strong. The exclusive skill, Fourth Wall, is activated. However, I had a wall. No matter how terrifying the presence beyond the wall, it wouldn't harm me as long as I didn't cross it. The character Kyrios Rodgraim is curious towards you. Kyrios noticed something strange. You endured it? How? Do you have the protection of a higher being? I opened my mouth before he became interested in the wrong thing. Kyrios. This world needs your help. Kyrios' expression changed. This is why you came looking for me? That's right. The small person. Then the small person replied. A small planet's constellation is looking tearfully at Kyrios Rodgraim. A small planet's constellation has sponsored 10 coins to Kyrios Rodgraim. Kyrios frowned. I don't need it. The small planet's constellation has received a great impact. A few raindrops fell from the sky. Every world has a time of destruction and every story comes to an end. It is now time for this planet. There were no emotions in Kyrios' eyes as he stared into the distance. However, I knew. Even if you became insensitive to everything in the world, there was no one who could escape from the bounds of their own story. Then why did you come back here? You left Peaceland a long time ago. Something called me. My eyes glanced towards Asuka Ren, who was staring at Kyrios. I knew what Kyrios had probably felt. Don't deceive yourself. Didn't you come back here to defend your home? There are no good memories here. This place. Is this the place where you were born weak? Kyrios shook for the first time. It is because of your mother gave you a cursed body? You know me quite well, incarnation of the scenario. Then I'll say this. Get lost. I won't tell you a third time. Are you scared? What? I asked if you are scared. This is your world and these constellations are destroying it. Are you scared of that snake? At this moment, a fearsome pressure that almost made my eyes pop out pushed down on my body. If you want to die, then I will kill you. I gasped for air, but didn't stop speaking. Don't deceive yourself about why you came here. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband is displeased with the behavior of Kyrios Rodgraim. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire is criticizing Kyrios Rodgraim's justice. The constellation Scribe of Heaven is severely criticizing Kyrios Rodgraim's interference in the scenario. The indirect messages emerged one after another and Kyrios' aura subsided. Weird people are chasing after you. The Monkey King and Archangel? It is strange. They have a strong pride. I spat out blood and started talking again. Focus on my story. Did you come here to see the end of this planet? I can't help this planet. Blue sparks appeared around his body. It was the probability storm. It was caused by killing the 2 Wind Shadow Squadron members. He wasn't a being summoned by the scenario and was limited by the probability, even if it wasn't as much as the constellations. Kyrios firmly grabbed a spark and said, "If I act, then I will only hasten the destruction of this planet." I understood what he meant. Probability was like a scale for the constellations. If one side changed the flow of the story without a valid probability, then the law of starstream would forcefully correct the balance. If I interfere with the scenario, other constellations watching the scenario will also be able to move. All I can do is watch the end of my home. I remembered. This was the real image of Kyrios Rodgraim that I knew. He left his home, overcame countless trials, and returned, only to be unable to save his home, despite his strength. This was White Storm, Kyrios Rodgraim. There is no need to take action with your own hands. However, if I was to back down here, then I wouldn't have come see Kyrios in the first place. Don't you need a disciple to learn the top secret technique of your white purity energy? The calm Kyrios was greatly shocked by my words. Please accept me as your disciple. I will be your agent on Peaceland. However, the shock only lasted a moment. I don't accept outsiders as a disciple. In addition, your strength is lacking to be qualified. My pride was a bit hurt. If Yu Jonghyuk was here, then would Kyrios hesitate to accept him as a disciple? I'm not qualified despite this? I picked up a branch in the vicinity. My magic power was absorbed by white pure star energy, and a wave of mana flashed at the tip of the branch. It was lacking in power, but it was still enough to show my achievement. Kyrios watched with amazement. In the second scenario, the first thing I purchased was this hidden skill. White pure star energy was Kyrios Rodgraim's famous technique. I will say it once again. The outsider Kim Dokja requests for the master of the White Storm School to accept me. Kyrios made a decision after a few hours. He released the white energy and spoke in a human voice. The White Storm School was wiped out after I left. I don't know if it still exists. He kept me waiting for 2 hours just to say this. The strong people of the star steam lived in a unique time zone in order to maintain their sense of self over the long years. Okay. I will receive you as a disciple. Kyrios didn't ask me how I knew white pure star energy and how I knew about his secret technique. Then the training started. Kyrios Rodgraim was a Murim world returnee. Despite the inherent limitations of the small people, he mastered several martial arts and succeeded in transcending his race without the help of the system. There are many legends about him who advanced to the first Murim and reigned as the leader. He killed all the enemies taller than himself, cut off the penis of a drunk man making fun of his height, and has an association with the famous constellation the Snake. Your smartphone has become smaller as well? I heard Han Soo-young's voice and turned my smartphone off. I put it in the subspace of the coat and it became like this. Damn, you hog all the good things to yourself. Han Soo-young was able to safely overcome the Wind Shadow Squadron and join up with us. They were probably deceived by the dead enemy like I was. She muttered, I never imagined that Kyrios, the strongest person in First Murim, would be from Peaceland. The strongest person can't be obscured and he is close to the strongest. But how do you know this name? The name appeared in the first part of the novel. It is the first time I've seen it myself. This is also my first time. In any case, wait near Ren. I was taught by Kyrios in the rocky area. My goal was to learn Kyrios' secret technique in 2 weeks and return to Veronica. If the story progressed as the original, then this should be when the Japanese king, the sovereign of 8 heads, moved to trample all 4 kingdoms. Of course, things weren't that easy. On the first day, this was the task that Kyrios gave me. Repeat this 1,000,000 times. 1,000,000 times? Yes, 1,000,000. Did you see what I just showed you properly? I saw it well. Kyrios stood in front of me and stretched out his sword. This was the basic stab posture. Why this? Every disciple starts here. It is to aim for the smallest point. In one extremely condensed and tempered point, the universe begins. I see. I didn't know what he meant. You were born big and don't know the meaning of being small. The moment I heard this, something popped into my head. According to Ways of Survival, Kyrios had a complex about his height. I told him, humans aren't very big either. Yes, that's what I'm saying. In the end, all of us are specks of dust from the perspective of the universe. That's why it is wrong to call a small person a small person. Humans and small people are just dust in the end. It felt like he was rationalizing his small height. However, isn't big dust different from small dust? The important thing is the size of the universe, not the size of the dust. Even if you are just a speck of dust, the degree of your existence can vary depending on how big the universe is. No, the smaller the dust speck, the closer it is to the origin of the universe. This makes it easier to understand the essence. I thought it sounded nice. Ah. Do you understand? What does that have to do with stabbing? Kyrios looked at me with contempt and said, "This is why people shouldn't be born big. Work hard on the stabbing." Then Kyrios disappeared. He seemed disappointed in me. It was natural. Way of the Wind had proven my poor talent. It might take me 2 decades to learn the secret technique instead of 2 weeks. 4 days passed. Do it straight. Shouldn't you attempt to do it properly? 5 days passed. This is why those born with big bodies. A week passed. Kyrios' hatred of big people didn't stop. Have you ever been born as an insect? Cockroaches probably learn better than you. If such a cockroach exists, then I would like it as a teacher. Do you want to die? Finally, it was the end of the 2nd week. I was tired of stabbing and fell down. I still hadn't learnt the skill. Kyrios was deeply disappointed with my talent and soon disappeared. It was like a small breeze had blown for a moment. Once Kyrios was completely gone, I found Asaka Ren and Han Soo-young waiting nearby. Let's run away. What? Did you learn everything? It looked like you couldn't do anything at all. I stole it. I quietly closed my eyes and whispered something. The next moment, a violent white lightning bounced around me. It was the secret technique of Kyrios, electrification. Eh? What is this? You clearly couldn't, I told you. I stole it. Kyrios Rodgraim has been added to the 5th bookmark. This was my purpose from the beginning. I placed the strongest returnee Kyrios into my bookmark skill and tried to raise my understanding of him as much as possible. In the first place, Kyrios wasn't willing to teach me properly. Strong people like Kyrios weren't simply enough to give up their secret techniques because of flattery. His purpose was to keep me here until the end of the scenario and then torture me after the scenario ended to find out everything I knew. That's why we have to run away. Shit, I understand. Han Soo-young grumbled. By the time we finished the preparations, the sun was shining in the distance. The warmth of dawn surrounded us. Peaceland changed seasons every 2 weeks. It was winter when the training started, but now spring was coming. Asaka Ren suddenly paled. The sovereign of 8 heads has started moving. Really? He is using the absolute throne to call the Japanese incarnations together. It was time. Spring was the season where creatures that hibernated woke up one by one. The season of the snake hunt would soon arrive. Chapter 129. Those Who Face a God. Part 3. Veronica's High Walls. Giants filled the plains below the highlands. They were once humans, but were now disasters. Gong Pilda roared as all the turrets on the castle fired. Damn bastards. This is my land. There were approximately 50 Japanese people who ran through the plains. This level of strength meant that more than half the disasters of Peaceland had gathered. Do. Get lost. Gong Pildu was slightly upset as he fired the guns. He didn't know how he got into this situation. However, Li Jihai thought that the after-effects of Kim Dokja destroying the green zones still remained. Li Jihai watched the great army of disasters and her fingers trembled. Damn, I wish there was a lake. Let's do as much as we can. Li Hyunsung walked over from the lookout post and stood beside Li Jihai. Li Jihai turned around and saw Li Boksoon. Li Jihai's eyes shone. Grandmother, can you borrow the power of your sponsor? Hoo, do you want my ancestor to continue their service? This is really... Soldier Ajusi, Hewan Uni's group still isn't here? Li Hyunsung nodded heavily. There is no news of the next group. Before he left, Dr. SSI said they would be doing a bonus scenario. Damn. Then we have to stop them. Then dim shadows appeared above them in the sky. Li Jihai discovered the small insects filling the sky and was frightened. Ack. There were a variety of flying monsters mixed in. Li Gilyung and Shin Yusung had finished preparing the beast and insect army. Li Gilyung was sitting on an insect that resembled a wasp and waved his hand. Meanwhile, the disasters arrived at the castle and started to break down the walls. Li Hyunsung spoke in a tense voice. They're coming. The full-fledged siege began. Do. On one side, Gong Pildu fired, while on the other side, the small people shouted. Fight! For Veronica! The voices resonated through the castle as the walls were gradually crushed by the disaster's kicks. Now the term disaster seemed really fitting for these humans. Would I be like that if I chose to become a disaster? Li Jihai remembered Kim Dokja's words and bit her lips. The answer was still unknown. The party held on better than expected. There were Gong Pildu's guns and Li Hyunsung's great mountain smash that dealt effective blows to the disasters. The large number of insects and monsters also bought time. At this rate, they might be able to protect the castle. This was what Li Jihai thought until black clouds covered the horizon. What is that? Li Jihai doubted her eyes. The King of Disasters has received the scenario buff effect. Some of the probability constraints on the constellation Sovereign of 8 Heads has been lifted. Crazy, how do we defeat that? Something the size of a huge fortress was coming this way. There were 8 heads and a tail. Ajusi! Come quickly! Li Jihai inwardly screamed. We left Curios territory and moved through the rocky area towards the plains. Asaka Ren opened her mouth. I think the Sovereign of 8 Heads has already started acting. I can't feel his call in this area. Ren SSI, are you okay? I can resist it to a certain degree, thanks to my sponsor. However, the incarnations with weak sponsors have already flocked to the plains. In the case of the Absolute Throne, there was a difference in the intensity of the command depending on the distance. There was nothing absolute in the star steam, even if it had the absolute qualifier. Along the way, we found the bodies of the small people. Asaka Ren spoke with a bitter expression. Not everyone in Japan chose to be a disaster. I know. I read the original so I could say it clearly. Apart from Asaka Ren, the Japanese people who became small people couldn't be seen because they were already dead or hiding somewhere in this world. In fact, I don't think the Japanese people who choose to be a disaster are bad. They are just ordinary. In the original work, a number of Korean incarnations also chose to be a disaster. This was probably a normal choice for ordinary humans. Han Soo-young also agreed. To put it bluntly, I didn't choose to be a small person. Kim Dokja also didn't make this choice to protect the small people. Han Soo-young's words were sharp. The small planet's constellation is looking at you with hurt eyes. It didn't matter if it was for the sake of the small people or the disasters. In the end, the fight here was a spectacle. People became immersed in their role and forgot this fact. They sold their lives to make money. Then that money would be used to buy other stories. Maybe humans always lived this way. Then a huge aura rose from the rocky area. It was quite far away, but I could feel the formidable aura from here. Curios has noticed. Hurry. I ran away after asking him to teach me. I would suffer incredible pain if I was caught. We started to run across the plains in the direction of Veronica. In the midst of running, Asaka Ren often looked back at the rocky area. Han Suyang glanced at Ren and asked, "Are you sorry?" "Huh? No. Don't you feel that it is weird? It is probably the first time you saw a character that you made." "Yes. Furthermore, he is handsome." I didn't say it before, but Kyrios was handsome. In Ways of Survival, a handsome person was often described as comparable to Yu Jong-hyuk, and this was a perfect way to describe Kyrios. The problem was his height and his temper. How did it feel to see a person you created breathing and talking? If the author of Ways of Survival was alive somewhere, then wouldn't he feel something similar when looking at Yu Jong-hyuk? Asaka Ren spoke to me. "Alright, Dr. SSI. I have a question." "Yes. How did you gain Kyrios' favor?" "His favor?" I got the impression that Kyrios liked Dr. SSI. "Huh? Kyrios acts angry when he likes someone. The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire is listening." That reminded me, Kyrios treated me quite well, despite me not having talent. Despite all the times he swore at me. Dr. SSI. I looked back at Ren's words, and my expression stiffened along with the two women. Dark smoke was rising from the place where I was looking. It was in the direction of Veronica Castle. We glanced at each other and started running. Not long afterwards, the battlefield of Veronica Castle was revealed. There were the bodies of the fallen monsters as well as the trampled corpses of the small people. I also saw people whose heads were crushed. Perhaps this was Lee Hyun-sung's work. As we got closer, the number of small people corpses increased and the bodies of the Japanese incarnations decreased. No way, I couldn't be late. Then after a while, we witnessed a terrible scene at the back of the shattered palace. Do-do-do-do-do. Gong Pildu's cannons fired. Fortunately, all the party members were safe. Lee Hyun-sung was badly injured while Lee Jae-hai and the children were exhausted, but their lives were intact. However, it was dangerous. They were fighting. "Crazy!" Han Suyang shouted and stepped back towards me. "Ah! Izumi!" Asaka Ren groaned with pain as she grabbed her temples and fell down. 20 Japanese people were united around one being. Behind the body of a man whose pupils had turned black, there was a shadow of a huge monster that covered the whole sky. The heads and tail were reminiscent of a blood-red valley. The king of the disasters was in a streamlined form. Suddenly, one head bent down towards the nearest small person. Small person turned white with terror and the snake smiled at him. There was a crunch and only the lower body of the small person remained. Save me! Save me! The flesh of the small person was sucked into the mouth of the red snake. Nobody was able to stop it. All the small people, including my party moments, stood like hardened mannequins and watched the scene. I belatedly realized. It wasn't because my party members fought hard that they were unharmed. The gunfire continued, but it was resignation, not killing intent, that filled Gong Pildu's face. It was the same for Lee Hyun-sung, Lee Jae-hai, and the others. The reason they were still alive because they were meals for the narrative-grade constellation. Every time the mouth of the snake opened, a few small people would disappear. The small planet's constellation is struggling with pain. The small planet's constellation is screaming. Han Suyang muttered. "Shit, what the hell is this?" One of Japan's 3 great villains, the father of Shutendaji, a flood control mythical monster. That monster was the sovereign of 8 heads, Yamada no Orochi. Maybe I would be torn apart by his teeth if I fought against him. Don't fight. We absolutely can't win. Asaka Ren mumbled and the entranced Han Suyang grabbed me. Kim Dokja. Surely we aren't going to fight that. Let's run away. Yes? I didn't answer. The giant head once again swept over the small people. It was a natural movement, like taking fish out of a fish tank. Han Suyang kept urging me, "It isn't too late. Now we can save the kids. Quickly bring them and run. Quadaduk." Ah. They're all going to die. I shook my head. Let's wait a bit longer. If I acted now, that guy would never move. Just a bit longer. Then the snake's mouth headed towards Li Jihai. Damn. I reflexively got up and ran forward. However, the snake's head was moving quickly towards Li Jihai. At this moment, something moved faster than me. One of the snake's heads fell to the ground with a pained scream. The cloud of dust was lifted and a man could be seen, standing on the snake's head. He looked at me with a distinctive cold expression. Kim Dokja. Yes, why did he always show up late? I smiled at him. You are late, Yu Jonghyuk. He had become a small person like me, but I felt a strong energy from Yu Jonghyuk. This person was holding a violet and glossy ornamental knife. As expected, he obtained the knife. We stared at each other without speaking before simultaneously turning towards the disaster. The constellation Sovereign of 8 Heads has revealed killing intent towards to you. Yamada no Orochi has his mealtime disturbed and his body started to swell up. Stay away, Kim Dokja. I will catch this guy. No, not this time. I stepped towards Yu Jonghyuk. The exclusive skill bookmark can now be activated. I felt the strong white energy seething in my heart. This time I have to catch him. In this scenario, I would break the principle of no killing that I had been maintaining. Chapter 130. Those Who Face a God. Part 4. Yu Jonghyuk glared at me and said, "It is too unreasonable with your skills." Messages poured in. Constellations who hate the Korean peninsula are showing hatred. The constellations who hate violence and slaughter are going crazy. The constellations who hate the Korean peninsula desires your death. I looked at the Japanese incarnations. Their sponsors were all people I knew. They had entered Baihyung's channel and drove someone I knew to death. I made a promise. Thus, I have to catch him. Promise? The first promise was to kill the Dakibi, and the second promise was to revive her. Finally, there was the third promise. It was this. I promised to get revenge on the constellations who killed her. Yu Jonghyuk probably understood from these words alone. Maybe in this world, only Yu Jonghyuk could understand. Yu Jonghyuk replied, "I can't concede because of that. This bastard really doesn't understand." We started moving as soon as we finished talking. The place where we were standing was destroyed and the head of the giant snake stared at us. The constellation Sovereign of 8 Heads is furious. It was a fearsome presence. It wasn't just the body but the shadow of the constellation. This much power was revealed despite only a handful of the probability constraints being lifted. This was the dignity of the narrative grade. It was an opponent that I would have normally never dealt with. Yamada no Orochi. He was interpreted as an evil spirit in ancient Japanese mythology. There is only one way to deal with him at this point. I observed Yu Jonghyuk's sword and said, "You have obtained the Totsuka no Tsurugi." In the original third regression, Yu Jonghyuk didn't get the sword. It was probably because Yu Jonghyuk had become stronger in this round. Yu Jonghyuk wondered, "You know this sword?" "I know. It is a famous sword. Totsuka no Tsurugi. It was the sword used by Susanoo to cut down Yamada no Orochi. In other words, in a distant story, it defeated Yamada no Orochi once. It was the same as Gaibik and Ito. The history of defeat was a fatal weakness for all beings made of stories. The 8 heads cried at once and shed bloody tears. Cheeky worms. Crazy, was he using his true voice? The exclusive skill, Fourth Wall, is strongly activated. The whole area was devastated with a single word. More than half the small people who heard it died of their internal organs rupturing. Li Jihai and Li Gilyung coughed up blood and also collapsed. There were even disasters who bled after hearing the words. Of course, I had the wall and Yu Jonghyuk's mind barrier had a high level so we could endure it. "You don't speak well, so shut up." I taunted him. However, the snake didn't use his true voice again. He didn't have sufficient permissions, so using his true voice consumed a large amount of probability. Instead, his anger led to action. The 8 heads simultaneously breathed out fire, turning the area into a furnace. We quickly ran behind a wall. It was Yu Jonghyuk who acted first. The character Yu Jonghyuk has used giant body transformation LV2. As expected, this skill had also been passed to him. I thought that I should learn this skill. Yu Jonghyuk's body swelled up, he leapt into the air. Giant body transformation was a technique that temporarily exploded the latent power of a body to imitate the power of a giant. For a short time, Yu Jonghyuk's combat power would be even stronger than it was before he became a small person. The problem was the duration of the skill was only 5 minutes. The power of splitting the sky filled Totsuka no Tsurugi. Yu Jonghyuk kicked off from the wall and rushed forward. Splitting the sky reached a perfect state and gushed out from the ether blade. Breaking the sky sword. Vanish. Splitting the sky desolation. The flash of light that emerged from Yu Jonghyuk's sword split into dozens of branches and struck the sword. Gruesome black blood emerged from the wounds caused by Totsuka no Tsurugi, and one of the 8 heads started to rot. This was the only sword that could kill Yamada no Orochi. Yu Jonghyuk wasn't a constellation, so stage transformation didn't occur. Still, it was obvious that the sword was effective. The constellation, sovereign of 8 heads, is howling. 1 head was cut off, but Yamada no Orochi was still intact. In order to kill him, all 8 heads must be cut off. Yu Jonghyuk didn't hesitate and jumped towards the 2nd head. The battle was so gorgeous that no one could interrupt. It was amazing as Yu Jonghyuk zigzagged to avoid the heads and tail. The main character was the main character for a reason. Even so, a person like this died over 100 times in ways of survival. Once again, this world was terrible. Kim Dokja. Are you going to just watch? Didn't you say you would catch him? Yu Jonghyuk destroyed 3 heads in an instant and shouted towards me as he gasped. It seemed like he was losing steam. I smiled and replied, I meant I would deal the final blow. You bastard. I leisurely managed my stamina and waited. It wasn't time yet. On the other hand, Yu Jonghyuk was in a hurry and squeezed all his fearsome strength at once to hit the other heads. In the process of cutting off the 4th head, Yu Jonghyuk's giant body transformation was released. Flames and poison poured out from the snake's heads at once. Yu Jonghyuk dodged with agile movements, but couldn't escape being damaged by the tail. The character Yu Jonghyuk has used strong self-defense LV9. Only the tip of the tail touched him, but Yu Jonghyuk's body was thrown back into the castle's wall. The bloody Yu Jonghyuk emerged from the terrible dust clouds. Kim Dokja. Your help, I'm going to act now. Stupid person. You can't do it alone. Back off now and later. You've had a hard time. Now it is your turn to watch me. The moment the remaining 4 heads gazed at me, I picked up Totsuka no Tsurugi on the ground and ran towards Orochi. The number 5 bookmark has been activated. Activation time, 3 minutes. Your understanding of the character is low, so only a part of the character's skill is activated. It was fine. This much was still good. The skill can only be used by a small person. Your current body configuration is similar to the physical makeup of the character. I only needed 1 skill anyway. The level of the character is too high to fully reproduce the skill level. The level of the skill being activated is forcibly adjusted. The exclusive skill Electrification LV10 is activated. The magnitude of the consciousness determines the degree of existence, making it possible for the smallest being to see the greatest universe. The phrases left by Kyrios and ways of survival passed through my head, and the flow of magic power around me changed. The magic power soon became particles, and the electrons that resonated with each other started to tremble violently. There is a beginning in existence, so the smallest is the greatest. There was the sound of something popping deep in my mind. Maybe it was something like the coolness of the Big Bang. I opened my eyes and saw my body covered with a blue-white lightning. It was like I had become lightning. The formidable power was wriggling inside me. It felt like I could do anything. If I wanted to penetrate the sky, I would penetrate the sky. If I wanted to separate the sea, I would do so. Then if I wanted to cut off this snake's head, I would cut it. There was a roar as I took the first step. Then with the second step, I appeared right in front of the snake's neck. The third step caused the white lightning to scream in the area, and then the fourth step. I passed by Orochi, leaving a storm behind. My feet were damaged by the lightning and blood poured from my nose and mouth. My body stumbled like I was experiencing an electric shock. I looked back and saw 3 snake heads falling to the ground. I drank a magic power recovery potion and the swelling in my hand decreased. The constellation, Sovereign of 8 Heads, is shocked by your swordsmanship. In just a moment, Orochi had 1 head left and was floundering from the pain. The constellation, Sovereign of 8 Heads, is questioning the fairness of the scenario. I laughed loudly. You are raising an issue of fairness? The duration of electrification was 3 minutes, but right now, my body couldn't take more than 3 steps. In other words, I had to kill him in 3 steps. Sparks filled the air, and then that damn voice was heard again. Geez, a person of noble blood looks so ugly. I thought I would hear this voice. The intermediate Dakibi Ganul was looking down at this place. Ah, really? I can't just watch. This is a big problem. Unlike his words, he didn't seem to want to interfere. The constellation, Sovereign of 8 Heads, is shouting with anger. HRMM, you can't make an impossible demand. As you can see, you've used up all the probability allowed in this scenario. They can't lend you any more power. Yamada no Orochi's roar covered all of Peaceland. This must have been the first humiliation that the narrative-grade Yamada no Orochi had experienced. Someone was always a spectacle. Now the victim of the spectacle was himself. He was filled with anger. There might be only 1 head left, but Orochi's strength was increasing. Protect the king. The confused Japanese incarnations ran forward. This was the power of the absolute throne. I heard a message from the Dakibi Yunki in my head. Didokja Sasai. The channel is about to burst. I will block the indirect messages for a while. I was currently using the power of Kyrios, so all types of constellations would come to watch me. Stop. My party members regained their spirits and ran to stop the disasters. Li Hyunsung barely raised his blood body while Gong Pildu supported them with gunfire. Meanwhile, Yamada no Orochi was preparing for the final reversal. No, wait a minute. Hey Constellation. What are you doing? An ominous current was appearing around Izumi's body, the incarnation of Yamada no Orochi. It was the sign of a probability storm. The panicked Dakibi shouted. Look here. Turn back. The Bureau. It is an emergency. It was a real disaster, brought about by the desire not to be defeated by me. The Dakibi belatedly used the system control, but it was unfortunately too late. The great hall opened in the wide sky. I realized that Orochi had crossed the line. He even borrowed the probability that the supreme being granted to the absolute throne. Everyone held their breaths as they stared at the sky. Someone has interfered with the scenario system. Restless sensations were surging from the great hall. Chaos. Disorder. A void. It was the origin of all fear. This existence was lending its probability to Yamada no Orochi. The shadow of the remaining snake head started to grow larger due to the probability. It grew bigger and bigger. It would grow until it covered the castle and the entire planet. Measuring, sword. All beings, whether they were incarnations or small people, collapsed on the ground and groaned as they coughed up blood. The dreadful difference pressed heavily on my body. My knees were forced to the ground. Everything was the worst. Mir, ans, going, against, a, great, star. I instinctively realized. I couldn't win even if I used electrification. At my level, I couldn't win even if I woke up the dead. Nevertheless, I laughed. You just made the worst mistake. The star stream was about balance. If someone destroyed the probability, then someone else would obtain it. Thus, the balance would now be adjusted. A fearsome aura was coming from a distance at a rapid pace. It wasn't Yamada no Orochi, or the unknown god, beyond the Great Hall. However, nobody here could ignore this arrogant existence. Since when could a god from another world intervene in the scenario? He was the absolute being born on this planet. Don't get involved in my planet's matters, if you don't want to confront me where my story began. The White Purity, Kyrios Rodgrame. Get lost. Monster of this world. Lightning stretched out as Kyrios soared towards the sky. It was a powerful force that wasn't pushed back at all by a narrative-grade constellation. Kyrios revealed his true strength and broke through the tentacles, forcibly closing the entrance of the Great Hall. Then Orochi's power started plummeting. You. I didn't miss this gap and used the remaining 3 steps. All the magic power in my body flowed towards Totsuka no Tsurugi. Then I saw the incarnation of Yamada no Orochi smiling at me. It was an expression that welcomed the long-awaited liberation. Killing one person to save other people's lives. The selfish sword moved, and something rolled along the ground. You have killed a person. You have been deprived of the title of King of No Killing. The constellation of Yamada no Orochi blinked from the severe blow. There was a terrible scream and the shadow of the constellation started to scatter into ashes. An unbelievable feat has been accomplished. You have hunted a king of disasters for the first time. The script of the king of disasters descending in the scenario wasn't expected. You have achieved a non-existent story. Due to the completion of an impossible story, all Dokibis of the Seoul Dome and Tokyo Dome will enter an emergency meeting. I looked up at the constellations shining in the sky. All of them wouldn't know. It was the feeling of a person running hard only to arrive at the starting point. Congratulations! The star stream has acknowledged your grade. You have accomplished a total of 4 stories. The end of the 6th scenario. I finally arrived at the starting point towards the end I wanted. Now you must build your last story to become a constellation.